Okay, you know what is incredibly tempting? For the same price as a brand new Hyundai i20N, you could potentially buy a Porsche 911 instead. Although, whether you should buy a 996 generation of Porsche 911 might be a whole different story, because these things can have some pretty hectic exterior issues in the interior, in the tech, and the electronics. And certain aspects of the ownership and maybe even the driving experience might not meet your expectations.
And some of that can be due to the mechanical and reliability concerns, and not to mention what it can cost to fix them.
Luckily, this is ReDriven, and we take you through all the pros and cons of used cars, so hopefully you don't buy a shit one. And that means we're going to show you exactly what can be involved in the ownership experience for the Porsche 996. ReDriven is powered by Wipertech. More on them later. In the meantime, scan that QR code. How about we start with why you might be a bit too soft to drive one of these? See, if you're looking at buying a 996 because of just how affordable they are, but you're also expecting modern 911 levels of refinement, yeah, you might be disappointed. Actually, one of the big changes between the 997 that replaced this to the 996 was massively improved NVH levels. However, personally, I don't really think that's necessarily an improvement. Look, don't get me wrong, a 997 potentially makes for a more pleasant everyday driving experience, but these, they have more mechanical and road and even sort of body noise about them, and that makes for a more visceral experience. I know that's delving into car journo wanker speak, but it's true. But this feels kind of like an older air-cooled 911 driving experience. For me, this has a rawer character than a 997, or especially a 991 or a 992. And isn't that what driving a 911 should be all about? But if the excessive noise in here isn't appealing to you, well, the degrading foam in the air conditioning system might just make matters worse. See, this has been a problem across all Porsches of this period. The foam that's in the HVAC ducting, or in behind the doors, or in behind the dashboard, it just degrades and breaks down. And the result can be not just more interior rattles, but when you turn the fan on high, you can get covered in bits of black and grey bits of foam. And also, to fix it, sometimes it requires the entire dashboard coming out of the car. And this can cost anywhere from $2,000 to sometimes over $4,000. So before you buy one of these, just make sure you crank the fan on the air conditioning all the way to its highest level and see if any debris comes out. And here's another hot tip: just push on the top of the dashboard. It should be silent like this. If it kind of makes like a hollow kind of creaking sound, not a good sign. But another common complaint with the air conditioning, the LCD panel here, the pixels, can sort of start to drop out. This is super, super common, although it's not a big problem anymore because they can be fixed and it should be pretty affordable to do. Also, an example is fitted with the original Porsche screen style infotainment system, the ones that were built into the car from the factory. Not only do these things absolutely suck these days, but the pixels can die on those as well. Now, rather than fixing this, we highly recommend just ditching that original infotainment system because they absolutely suck. And you've got a few other options here in terms of replacing it. Number one, you can do what Stephen has done and fit one of the official Porsche retrofit style infotainment systems. These things are awesome. You get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, really stable Bluetooth connection. The only problem though, these do ask quite the premium. And there are other aftermarket screen replacements available out there that, for less money, might actually outspec these Porsche items. Also, if you're going to replace the infotainment system, you might as well do the speakers and the amplifiers at the same time. Even in the optional, more premium sound systems in these, they were never that great to begin with, and these days they've probably doofed their last doof. Actually, you know what? To show you what's involved in doing all this sort of stuff, we teamed up with our mates from Automotive Superstore to make kind of the ultimate in-car entertainment guide video. It should answer all your questions. Oh, by the way as well, for any parts and accessories that you need for your car, simply scan that QR code or hit the link below, type in your rego, and the Automotive Superstore site will show you all the parts that are best suited to your car, and they ship Australia-wide for ultimate convenience. But this next little issue could leave you completely stranded. See, if the battery in this goes flat, well then the frunk release no longer works. Even on the pre-update models with their cable kind of lifting frunk release, the central locking can lock when the battery goes flat, so you can't get into the frunk. Guess where the battery is? It's in the frunk. Basically, this can turn into a horrible catch-22 situation. But look, as long as you have a battery starter pack or some tools and some decent DIY abilities, there's kind of a solution. See, there is a jump point just down here, so you just attach your battery starter pack to that and the front should open, hopefully. Or the other option is you jack the car up, take this wheel off, pull the inner guard liner out, and deep in there's a cable. When you pull the cable, it pops the front open. Look, Porsche aren't often accused of making some terrible design decisions, but this is one of them. Also on other electronic gremlins, the brake light and reverse light switch on the Tiptronic models, they're known to wear out over time, but again, it's not hard or expensive to fix. The door lock modules in the window micro switches, they're starting to fail with age. Make sure these work, especially the window mechanism part, because when you open it, the glass drops down and then lifts back up again. If it doesn't do that, it can damage the mechanisms in the door and even some of the seals around the door itself. For the turbo models, the electronically operated rear spoiler hydraulic actuators, they can develop leaks or even fail. Just make sure that it goes up and down smoothly. And for the convertible models, make sure that the entire roof mechanism opens and closes and shuts perfectly and also doesn't leak. Best case scenario, if it's being a bit funny, it might just need a realignment, but worst case scenario, you might need to replace the whole retractable roof thing, and that is going to cost all of the money. And anyway, if you want a topless Porsche, just buy the Boxster. They can be awesome. We've actually made a full review video of the original Boxster. Go watch it, it'll explain how wonderful those things are. But when it comes to the 911 convertibles or cabriolets, I personally just don't get them at all. Why would you buy one? I also don't understand why you'd ever buy one of the Tiptronic automatic models, obviously excluding anyone with medical or mobility issues. But if ever a car was going to reward you for learning how to drive a manual, oh my God, it's one of these. And anyway, owners of Tiptronic auto models have reported sluggish and unresponsive shift feel, even in the turbo models. Although, as absolutely divine as this shifter is to use, the manuals can possibly be guilty of some mechanical and reliability issues. I'd love to elaborate on this, but I can't because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But luckily Jim is.
Yeah, they can have some issues, but overall they're pretty good. They can have some second gear synchro issues where it just crunches into second, and other times the second gear can just pop out of gear. Occasionally the pinion bearings can fail. If you've got an issue there, you will hear a whine coming from the transmission, and that increases with road speed. Not terribly common, but very expensive to fix. The shifter mechanism and the shifter cables, look, there's a lot of plastic parts in there, and over time that plastic, that just wears basically, and the cables can stretch as well. And basically what happens there, it all starts feeling a bit vague. You know, like when Adam hasn't had one of his small pretentious coffees. Obviously clutch wear depends on how it's been treated, but it's likely you'll be putting a clutch in it at some point when you do the IMS bearing, and we'll get to that later. Now for the autos. Now surprisingly, about 30% of these are the Tiptronic automatic, and surprisingly again, Porsche recommend that the transmission oil is filled for life. Now, as we know, that is a terrible idea. Contaminated oil is absolutely terrible for valve bodies and solenoids. It just destroys them. So yeah, absolutely not filled for life. You really must service it.
Now look, obviously, no matter what generation of 911, they are one of the all-time great performance cars. But I tell you what, can't these things turn to shit if the suspension isn't at its best? By this age, things like the shocks, the springs, the top mounts, the bushes, even the drop links, they've probably all seen better days. And these things need to be at their best to give you the full 911 driving experience. But thanks to genuinely an amazing and incredibly supportive 996 community and just a great tuning scene for these, you can kind of customize the ride and handling to whatever you want. If you want a full-on track weapon, cool, you can do that. If you want something that's far more comfortable, like a long distance GT cruiser, well, you can modify or adjust the suspension to that as well. Whatever you want suspension wise, you can have. And to achieve whatever you want out of the suspension, go and check out the aftermarket parts options, because often they'll outlast, outperform and cost less than the Porsche OEM stuff. Actually, you know what? The same goes for the brakes. Actually, just on the brakes, these things need to be thoroughly checked out, because you can have an issue with the brake lines running from the front to the rear where they can corrode, and you might have a brake line failure, and that can be terrifying. Now to the headlights. Not only are these things controversial due to their polarizing design, actually, you know what? I quite like the 996.2 kind of turbo style headlight. I'm kind of coming around to these. The kind of fried egg headlight on the 996.1s, yeah, I'm still not quite there on those yet. Regardless, especially actually on the fried egg ones, they're known to yellow and get hazy really, really easily. That's super easily fixed though. There's plenty of tutorials online to show you how to do it. But the far more concerning thing with the headlights is that the wiring harness inside them can degrade over time and the insulation itself can break down. And this can sometimes require pretty extensive repairs or maybe even replacing the headlights. Some owners have been quoted anywhere from $3,000 to over $7,000 for a pair of new headlights. Also, these intakes, they can vacuum up leaves and road debris like a Dyson on steroids. But the problem here is when it sort of goes in there and it kind of sits there, it can trap moisture, and this can cause all sorts of corrosion issues. It can even destroy the AC condensers. Actually, these C4 and the turbo models are especially vulnerable thanks to their larger nostrils. But look, as long as these grills have been removed and the whole thing's been cleaned out properly, regularly, you shouldn't have a problem. But something far harder to sort out, basically around the rear wheel arch here, there's a plastic liner up in here and sort of down in there. The problem is debris and crap can get caught up under there and in there. It traps moisture, and then you can have more and you have more corrosion issues. The issue with this is you can't even spot these problems on just a general walk around, and if this goes bad, it can be, what is going on? It can be massively expensive to repair all this. Sorry about all the distractions. But the other thing that can be massively expensive to do is repainting the entire car. Look, if you found a mint condition one like this, get it PPF'd almost immediately, because this sexy curvaceous body can cop a few stone chips and therefore surface rust, and you don't want that happening. Also, as tempting as some of the import 996s might be, thanks to their much lower prices, my God, you've got to be careful with these. We know of stories of dodgy importers bringing cars in that have some major rust issues. The hot tip here, if you're going to import a 996, stick with a trusted importer like Justin at Colton Classic, or go and watch our full import guide video to take you through how the import process works. Just be bloody careful of imports. But the last thing on rust, just check behind the door striker plate there, because corrosion's starting to build under there. It should look like this. Perfect. But look, anything made of plastic or rubber by this point might need some TLC. We're talking about the door seals, these bits of plastic here. But again, with any of this stuff, check out what's available with the aftermarket stuff, because often it can outlast the Porsche OEM things and cost less. For example, the wiper blades. Simply scan that QR code or hit the link below to get 15% off and free express shipping on honestly some of the best blades in the business. Chances are they're going to cost less than the OEM ones, and they're probably going to last longer and wipe better than anything else on the market as well, which is why we use them. Actually, wait, don't do any of that if you're going to do what Stephen has done and lend us your car to feature, like he's done with his beautiful 996 here. Because if you lend us your car, we're just going to give you a set of WiperTech blades for free as a thank you present. If you'd like to volunteer your car, there's a link down below. Hit it. Now, how's your tolerance for touching kind of gross, sticky, kind of tacky things? If it's very low, well, you might have to budget to replace plenty of the switchgear in these, or get yourself some rubbing alcohol so you can clean them all the time. And that's because, and look, this is common across so many cars in the Volkswagen family of this era, but any of the kind of rubberized or plastic buttons and things, they just degrade and they get sticky and tacky, or they start to kind of peel off. It's actually a good example just over here. This is starting to do it. Now, yes, it's only really an aesthetic problem. It's not going to create any functional kind of issues here. But the problem is, when it's such a funky interior design, this kind of stuff, it can, I don't know, cheapen what is otherwise a really nice interior. Actually, something else that can look very cheap and nasty in no time in here is if any of the interior trim or the leather hasn't been cared for properly. See, loads of the interior trim is plastic, and over time it can become brittle and it can sort of get a bit rattly, or worst case scenario, it can even fall apart. And then on the vinyl surfaces, over time these can kind of pull back and just look a bit rubbish. And then with any of the leather, yeah, if it hasn't been cared for, it can sort of crack or get, a bit hard, or actually even get a bit too loose as well. And it just looks a bit shit. Oh, and also the bolsters, especially on the entry side, again for kind of a sports seat, yeah, they can get a bit overly squidgy if not cared for. However, then you come across cars like this one that has clearly been incredibly well cared for. Like, the leather still feels absolutely fantastic. I'm going to go as far as saying this leather feels almost like it's a new car. All the plastics, like there's nothing rattly in here. Everything feels and sounds completely solid. Anything that's vinyl looks great. You've got a tiny bit of like the, sticky plastic rubbery surface there. And that's honestly about it. Even the grab handles on the doors, like that's going so well. And this is something that plenty of owners have complimented the 996. If the interiors are cared for, they're incredibly resilient. And obviously, if you find an example that hasn't been cared for, a lot of this stuff can be restored, but that'll be at a price. Or you could just sort of shift your attitude and you could just say that the wear and tear is just it's adding patina and character. That seems like a pretty good excuse to me. But no matter what condition the interior is in, it's a 911. It's still an incredibly usable interior. Like, you can daily drive these things. Okay, practicality first. Glove box, not a great size. It's okay, but it's felt lined, so nothing's going to rattle around there too much. On the passenger side, you've got a sort of, I'm not going to say it's a door bin, it's more of a sill bin just there. But in the doors, you've got these hidden bins, and they're a really, really good size. You've got a little cubby bin just here. That might actually be an ashtray. Just going to ignore that for a second. You've got a center console here, not that deep, but it's fine. There's a cup holder hiding under the air conditioning vents just there, and I love how this all kind of works. It's got so many little moving parts, which apparently don't break, which is great. And then there's a second one hiding as well. Just when you thought there was one, there's actually two. But again, look at this. It's just, you just want to play with the cup holders all day. That is so, so cool. And you've got a spot for your phone. Will it fit? Should slide under there. Steve's put some accessories in here. Okay, I'm not going to break that. You can put your phone down there as well. No sunglasses holder as such, nothing really under the seats. But for what is a genuine performance car, I think it's an okay amount of practicality up front. But let's talk seating position and comfort and all that kind of stuff. Okay, first of all, these seats, exquisite. It's funny, I don't know if you're the same as me, but when you see this seat on camera, it doesn't look all that supportive. But then you sit in it and the levels of squidge on your bum and your back, it just kind of sinks. So you just kind of get wrapped, you kind of get hugged by the seat basically. So, so nice. I do highly recommend the far more aggressive one-piece seats in the GT cars. They are sensational. I've been lucky enough to live with those seats for long periods of time, and they're some of the best seats in the business, although they do kind of look like aliens. And then seating position, typical for Porsche here, absolute perfection. Like where the gear shift is versus where the steering wheel is. It's just great. There's not a lot of adjustability, but I just don't think you need it. I've never really met anyone that sat in one of these and gone, yeah, I couldn't get comfortable. Also, just using the interior, like look at this, buttons. It's so nice to be in a car that isn't just purely screens. Everything is tactile and feels nice to actually use. Oh, it's so enjoyable. Speaking of comfort, in the backseat, I'm exactly 8 centimeters taller than absolute comedy legend and renowned Porsche collector Jerry Seinfeld. This is in my driving position, and it's incredibly spacious and comfortable back here. I've got plenty of room for activities, obviously being sarcastic. Look, I get that the 911 is sort of marketed as the everyday performance car, and that it has back seats, but this is clearly purely for the smallest of children or amputees, because I am completely crushed. Not just legs, I have nowhere for my feet, but head, I don't fit. What's the point of even having these back seats? But look, as far as features and practicality back here, yeah, nothing. Although, if you're happy to sacrifice the back seat, which you should because it's not really a back seat, and fold this down, hang on, then you actually do have a decent amount of cargo space in the back of these. Obviously you can throw like a backpack in the back seat section underneath there as well, which is pretty handy, but that's good practicality. Plus remember, you also have the frunk, so overall, these things are gonna have the same, if not better levels of practicality compared to like a Lexus LC500 or an Alpine A110 or a Toyota Supra. Funnily enough, all cars we have done full features on. And look, they are all excellent cars, but here's a big question. What will a 996 set you back these days? Currently here in Australia on the used market, pricing kicks off from around about $40,000. That's going to get you a base spec, high mileage Carrera in pretty bloody interesting condition. Interestingly, the hard tops generally ask substantially more than the drop tops. Again, if you want a topless Porsche, just buy the Boxster. Also, a manual transmission can often ask about a $10,000 premium over an equivalent auto. And fair enough. But, and excluding the seriously spicy stuff for a sec, a seriously mint condition C4S, exactly like this one, they're currently topping out at around about 120 grand. But now to the spicy ones. Turbos, they currently kick off from around about 130 grand and top out at about 240 for something very, very special. But if you want something seriously special, GT3s, they currently range from about $220 to $280. And then if you add an RS to the end of that GT3, well then pricing kicks off from around about $400,000 and just goes up from there. But here's the thing, if you're struggling to convince your better half or maybe your accountant that buying a 996 is going to be a sound financial decision, just tell them this. Excluding the cabriolets and the automatics, pricing for 996s have risen somewhere between 8 and 15% since 2019 to 2024. And those that we spoke to in the industry that know these things back to front, they don't see any reason that the pricing is either going to flatline or decline. It seems there's a solid chance the pricing is only going to go up. Obviously, I'm not a financial advisor. Before you make any big financial decisions, please go and seek the advice from a professional. And look, chances are you're lusting after a turbo or a GT3. That makes sense. You're only human. They are amazing cars. But let's say you've got $80,000 to $90,000 to spend. Well, that's either going to get you a pretty bloody average turbo or a really crap GT3 or an absolutely mint condition Carrera S or C4S like this. And in terms of driving, will you even be able to tell the difference? No, probably not. Okay, look, yes, the turbo and the GT cars, they're going to leave this thing for dead in a straight line. But you've also got to ask yourself, how often are you actually going to have the opportunity to properly sink that right foot? Plus, in the spicier models, with how rapid they are, when you do sink that right foot, you've got a higher chance of losing your license. And regardless, the less spicy models like this are easily powerful and fast enough. Actually, to put it into perspective, even a base model 996 Carrera can sprint from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in around about the same time as a Mark 7 Volkswagen Golf R. That is plenty fast enough for the real world. And anyway, for me, full acceleration is maybe 10% of the driving experience, because that's about how much of your overall driving time you're going to be able to spend with your foot buried deep into the carpet. But the thing that you're going to do 100% of the time you're driving is steer. And that's where these are just phenomenal. I so wish more modern performance cars had this level of steering feel and tactility and nuance. I know I sound like a wanker, but it's true. The steering is outrageously good. But it's also how the whole car responds to the steering. Like, this thing is small and light. To give you an idea of the size, it takes up around about the same footprint as a GR Corolla. And in terms of weight, every 911 after this became heavier. But that small size and light weight just makes it so enjoyable to use on a daily basis. Like, when you're parking it, you don't have to find a massive spot because it's the size of a Corolla. You can park it pretty much anywhere. The vision out of it is excellent. So there are hardly any blind spots to it. And then it just feels light and nimble and energetic. Like, we're in the suburbs, but here we go. I'm under the speed limit and I'm honestly loving this slight corner. We've got a roundabout coming up. Let's cut to that. Okay, here we go. Roundabout. We're under the speed limit. Turn it in through here. Oh, you can feel everything. Oh, so nice. Power out. There's the speed limit, and I had so much fun. But I think the most outstanding thing about this whole driving package is the way everything works in perfect harmony. Like, the shift feel to the pedal weight is perfect. The way the steering weight, the way the steering weight is just calibrated perfectly to how the car is controlled. And then that engine, it's so silky smooth and it sounds amazing, and it's got the perfect amount of torque and power for the real world. As a package, this thing is fucking amazing. Look, you're gonna hate me for saying this, but I've been fortunate enough to drive pretty much every 996, GT3, GT3 RS Turbo, even GT2. And yeah, they are all bonkers great cars. But even just a base model Carrera or this Carrera 4S, these are so special in their own right. I can't get over how wonderful a driving experience this is. I'm struggling to understand why you'd buy a 991 or a 992 when this thing's available. Like, my God, one more time. Seriously, this is just spectacular to drive. Or at least it is until you start thinking about IMS sparing failures and bore scoring and all those sorts of mechanical tantrums these can have. Is there any truth to any of this? What are the details in that? Again, I'm not a mechanic, am I? Jim, you are.
Let's tackle that IMS bearing first. Yes, they can fail, and when they do, they can cause catastrophic engine failure. and needless to say, it cost an absolute fortune to fix. Now, if you have the slightest interest in these cars whatsoever, you probably already knew that. Depending on what you read, the most affected are the 2000 to 2005 with the narrow timing chain. Allegedly, there's about an 8% failure rate with those. But that does mean 92% are okay. And now at this age, it's hard to say how many of those have been repaired or had some sort of upgrade or IMS solution. There's plenty of options out there for that. And while we're in this area, I'll also mention that the rear main oil seal is very much prone to leaking. Now, this could be the best oil leak you ever had, because if you get that repaired, you have to take the transmission out and the clutch off, which gives you access to the IMS bearing. So it's one of those cases where you might as well just do it all while you're in there kind of situation. Now, obviously, pricing does vary greatly depending on where you are having the car repaired, but in Australia, a decent IMS solution and a clutch and a rear main can set you back about $8,000. Next on the list here is the bore scoring. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's damage to the cylinder bore and the piston skirt. Now, this is more common in the 996.2, but not unheard of in the previous generation. Sometimes you'll hear a knocking noise, often it'll blow smoke, and obviously oil consumption goes with that. But the only real way to know for sure if you have an issue is to take the coil packs out and literally look inside the cylinders with the bore scope. Now, here's one you may not have heard of. It's called D-chunk failure. Basically, it's a catastrophic failure of the engine block. It's most commonly seen on early models, and it basically starts from a small crack at the top of the cylinder, and that crack propagates to the point where a chunk breaks out of the cylinder bore, and typically that is shaped like a capital letter D. See? Shaped like a D. These can have timing chain issues. It's more common on neglected examples or higher mileage, although it's hard to imagine that many of these have been neglected. But if it's on its way out, you will hear it rattle on cold start, just like every other car. Slightly less expensive, but somewhat more common, is an issue with the air oil separator, or the AOS. This is basically Porsche's answer to a PCV system. It's all made of plastic, and after a bunch of heat cycles over the years, that plastic becomes very brittle, and all the hoses and connections, they start to leak and basically fall apart. Often when they do, you'll often get a vacuum leak, which might trigger a fault code. And more often than not, you'll see excessive blue smoke on startup, and when it's idling, basically what's happening there is the oil that's in the breather system is getting sucked into the manifold. Things like cooling system, ignition coils, and oil leaks, look, they are exactly what you'd expect from a 20-year-old car, and the severity of those can vary greatly depending on how well the car's been looked after. Now, I should mention that all of that information is for the normal 996. As for the turbo and the GT2 and the GT3 with the Metzger engines, they are vastly different to an ordinary 996. Now, the ordinary 996 engine is a mass-produced water-cooled engine for road cars. Now, the Metzger engine is a motorsport-derived, dry-sumped, absolute beast that's been modified for road use. Now, as far as common mechanical issues go, there's virtually no overlap with these. And the few common concerns they do have, we'll get to that when one of you lends us a GT2 or GT3. And to volunteer your car, hit that link below.
Now look, we understand that this does seem like a bloody long list of common issues and concerns. By the way, we've listed all of that for free over at ReDriven.com. As long as one of these, ticks all the boxes in terms of pre-purchase criteria, including a specialist pre-purchase inspection. That's going to cost you money, but it's going to be the best money you'll ever spend. As long as it passes all that sort of stuff, you'll hopefully be okay. Because most long-term owners of 996s absolutely love them. But for the love of God, please be careful and do your homework before you buy one, because there are some absolute dogs out there on the used market, and not only will they break your heart, they'll probably break your wallet as well. But let's say hypothetically you have found the perfect 996 and it ticks all the critical boxes and whatnot. Well, which specific model should you buy? It's this one, actually. Yeah, a Carrera 4S, one of these. You get the wider and arguably more desirable turbo body, plus the turbo spec brakes and suspension geometry, but with a naturally aspirated engine that'll keep the purists happy, and it sounds bloody amazing. But it also has all-wheel drive, so you can drive with complete confidence no matter what the conditions. And it will most likely cost tens of thousands less than a turbo, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars less than something wearing a GT badge. So these things are absolute bargains at the moment, because something tells me that these won't be bargains for very much longer. And we don't think these will be either. But before you go and watch that, can you hit that subscribe button and tell all your mates about ReDriven, because just doing that, it helps us out so much, and we'd be so thankful. Legend. Just make sure that it goes, God. Well, you might need a budget.
Thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. Oh.